On a rainy Tuesday morning in Portland, Oregon, I sat alone in a family courtroom listening to my former husband, Grant Holloway, describe me as an irresponsible mother who had supposedly destroyed our children's future, while his attorney calmly displayed photographs of his expensive waterfront home, private school applications, and carefully selected bank statements, as though money alone could prove what kind of parent someone was. My hands trembled beneath the table as I thought about my two children, 10-year-old Sophie and 8-year-old Ethan, sitting several rows behind me, because Grant had spent the previous year convincing everyone that my modest life was evidence of failure, while conveniently leaving out the fact that he had been the one who walked away from our marriage and left me struggling to rebuild everything from nothing. The hearing had begun weeks earlier when Grant suddenly demanded full custody, claiming that my small apartment, inconsistent income, and decision to work temporary jobs made our children unsafe. And his lawyer spoke with such polished confidence that for several minutes I felt as though the entire room had already decided I was guilty before I had even been allowed to speak. I wanted to tell the judge about the years I had spent putting every spare dollar towards school supplies, medicine, groceries, and warm clothes. But I knew that emotional accusations would never compete with Grant's expensive legal team, so I simply sat there, trying to remain calm while watching the father of my children rewrite our entire history in front of strangers. 3 years earlier, my life had looked completely different because I had worked as an assistant manager at a small architectural company, had my own savings, and believed Grant and I were building a stable family together in our quiet neighborhood near the river. But after he accepted a position with a rapidly expanding development firm, his attitude changed, and every decision inside our home slowly became something he believed he had the right to control. He convinced me to leave my job temporarily after Ethan was born, promising that I could return whenever I was ready. Yet whenever I mentioned rebuilding my career, he reminded me that his salary paid the bills, criticized every purchase I made, and eventually transferred most of our shared savings into accounts I could no longer access. When Grant finally announced that he was leaving, he did not simply pack a suitcase and disappear as I expected. Instead, he canceled several shared accounts, moved into a luxury condominium across town, stopped contributing consistently to household expenses, and later used the financial crisis he had helped create as evidence that I was incapable of caring for our children, forcing me to take evening cleaning shifts at a community center while my sister watched Sophie and Ethan whenever our schedules overlapped. Those months were humiliating, but they also taught me something I had forgotten during my marriage. Poverty could make life difficult, but it could never measure the amount of love a parent carried for their children, and every night when I came home exhausted, Sophie would leave a tiny note beside my pillow saying, "Mom, you worked hard today," while Ethan would quietly save part of his dessert for me. Grant's attorney continued building her case by showing photographs of the cramped apartment where the children shared a bedroom, emphasizing the peeling paint and second-hand furniture while describing Grant's condominium as a stable environment. And then she placed a thick folder on the table containing utility records, employment documents, and statements showing that I had almost no savings. I finally stood and told the judge that those numbers did not tell the whole story, explaining that the accounts had been drained shortly before Grant left, and that I had repeatedly requested copies of our financial records, but Grant's attorney immediately called my explanation speculation, and the judge asked whether I had any actual evidence to support it. Before I could answer, Sophie suddenly raised her hand from the gallery, something she had never done in a courtroom before, and when the judge gently asked what she wanted to say, she walked forward clutching a battered blue notebook she had discovered inside an old storage box while helping me clean our apartment. "Mom said I shouldn't touch grown-up things," she whispered, "but I found this behind the loose board in Dad's old desk, and I think someone needs to see it because Dad told me that nobody would ever find it." And the courtroom became so quiet that I could hear rain tapping against the tall windows. The judge opened the notebook and discovered pages of handwritten instructions, account numbers, property references, and dates that appeared to connect Grant to several financial transfers made shortly before he filed for custody. But the most important discovery was a message from Grant's business partner discussing a plan to make my finances look worse while keeping valuable assets outside the accounts I could legally access. Grant immediately stood up and insisted that the notebook had been misunderstood. Yet his confidence disappeared when the judge asked why several figures inside it matched transactions already identified in the financial records. And for the first time that morning, Grant's attorney stopped speaking, as though she suddenly realized her carefully prepared argument was collapsing. The judge postponed the custody decision and ordered an independent financial review. And within days, investigators discovered that Grant had failed to disclose ownership interests in 2 rental properties, transferred substantial funds through a consulting company controlled by one of his associates, and deliberately stopped making certain payments so that my financial situation would appear far more desperate than it actually was. What shocked me most was learning that the strategy had not been created after our separation as Grant claimed, because records showed that parts of the plan had been discussed months earlier, proving that, while I had been struggling to keep our family together, he had been quietly preparing a story in which my hardship could be used against me. The final hearing felt completely different from the first because this time I did not sit there as a frightened woman trying to prove that she deserved her own children, but as a mother holding documented evidence that exposed the manipulation behind the entire case. And when the judge announced that temporary primary custody would remain with me, Grant was ordered to follow strict court requirements and provide financial support while the investigation continued. Months later, the court granted me permanent primary custody after determining that Grant had intentionally concealed assets and manipulated financial information. And although I had once dreamed of giving my children the expensive lifestyle he had promised them, I realized that what they truly needed was something money could never purchase. A home where they felt safe enough to laugh, speak honestly, and never wonder whether love came with conditions. The following year, I returned to school part-time, earned a bookkeeping certificate, and eventually found steady work at a local design firm, while Sophie began filling sketchbooks with drawings of houses, and Ethan became obsessed with building tiny wooden models at the kitchen table, turning our once-empty apartment into a place that finally felt alive with possibility. Looking back, I no longer remember the courtroom as the place where I almost lost my family, but as the place where the truth finally caught up with the person who had tried to use money as a weapon. And whenever Sophie asks whether finding that notebook changed our lives, I tell her that she did not save our family because she was brave enough to defeat someone. She saved us because she was brave enough to tell the truth when telling the truth mattered most. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.